Hey, so I just saw Inside Out 2 and it was pretty cool. My anticipation for this film has been kind of all over the place over the last year or so. This film has been on my watch list since I created my Letterboxd account like 2 years ago, so that's kind of crazy. But when the trailer dropped, I really didn't think it was gonna work because I felt a lot of it was just a repeat of the first. But after rewatching the original again, I realized there was a lot of stuff that this movie could do, so I changed my mind. It gets like a 7 on anticipation. First of all, before watching Inside Out 2, I watched the first Inside Out movie again, and yeah, it still really holds up. Inside Out is just such a human story. The ending is still so impactful, it just feels so human. Everyone has gone through something like this, and in general, Inside Out is one of the most creative films ever made, flat out. The animation is still so good, and the different creative areas for the world of Riley's mind are just absolute top notch. Imagination Land, the Memory Dump, the Dream Film Studio, it's all just filled with so much creativity and imagination. It's a one of a kind movie. I still have major issues like Riley not feeling like a person. I still like the ending, and that part feels very human, but besides that, she just feels like a robot being controlled by emotions. Like her changing her mind on certain things over and over again during the movie just feels very off. But besides that, it's a really great film, and so Inside Out 1 is a high 8 out of 10. In general, I just feel like Inside Out is the perfect movie to make a sequel out of. Like, this film has so much more potential than a bunch of other Pixar sequels. The film is very open-ended, and I'm glad we got a sequel for it. Anyways, that out of the way, let's get into Inside Out 2. Alright, so first of all, I figured I would talk about the old emotions, since Joy and a lot of the other emotions go through changes during the first movie. Joy is pretty great in the original, and she is also great in this. She is actually very unlikable in the first movie, but she learns to stop suppressing other emotions and grows much more during the first Inside Out. In this movie, she works much better with the other emotions, and I'm glad they remember that detail because she does respect the wishes of all the emotions, at least the old ones. She also has a little arc in this movie about not just yoinking all the bad memories of Riley and allowing her to grow into her own person, which I really liked. It's very brief and a little repetitive, but she does grow a little bit in this movie. Besides that, she's basically the same goofy, over-the-top self. Sadness is also basically the same. She has a cool relationship with embarrassment, which makes sense, but other than that, she's good, just like the original. She really doesn't do nearly as much though, but I appreciate the moments where Joy and Sadness work together in this movie without any trouble since they've grown since the original. Joy and Sadness are basically on the same level of quality as in the original, but I actually think the three other emotions improve in this movie. Joy is with the three of them in this movie instead of Sadness, so they get a lot more to do. Fear is only a little bit better. He switched voice actors and he sounds about the same, so it's not that big of a deal. I like how he agrees a lot with what Anxiety does. That just makes sense, it fits his character. Disgust is about the same. I like the stuff with her in the video game character. It was neat, but I actually think the MVP here is Anger. I actually didn't really care for Anger in the original. Not that he was bad, he was just the least interesting. He's angry, he gets fire in his head, that's about it. But in this one, he's actually a lot more likable. Like, when he gets to talk to Joy about helping Riley, like, he does actually care about Riley and the other emotions, which was a detail that I really appreciated. Plus, he has the funniest moment in this movie with him wanting to murder Anxiety, which was just pretty great. That's actually really funny. Overall, yeah, the old emotions are actually improved quite a bit from the original. Not by much, but I thought it was worth pointing out. Okay, new emotions. These guys were the main selling point of the movie. Ennui, or Boredom, which by the way, I'm just calling him Boredom from now on because I don't want to learn how to pronounce that. Anyways, Boredom was kinda lame, I didn't really care for him. He was my least favorite out of the four new emotions. He kinda just slacks off for the whole movie, plus him being sarcasm was a weird retcon since in the original, disgust was actually sarcasm. And the sarcasm thing is like half of his personality, so that kind of made his entire existence pointless. Embarrassment is good. I like his relationship with Sadness a lot, and I like how different he was from all the other three emotions, with him making his own decisions independently. I didn't think he was that interesting for maybe the first half of the movie, but once he and Sadness actually do stuff together, he gets pretty good. Also, love that moment with him in the ending, that was great. Envy is pretty great, easily my favorite design out of all the emotions. Just being this little child is so good. She doesn't do much and is outshined by Anxiety a lot, but I just love the design, it's so good. Anyways, the real star of the show and my favorite part of this movie is definitely Anxiety. I really like how this movie has an actual villain. It really makes it stand apart from the first film. It's also super realistic with Anxiety just taking over everything the moment she shows up and completely changing Riley's whole personality with the belief it'll make her better. I also really like how Anxiety is like Joy from the first movie since she is also suppressing all the other emotions but in a much more extreme way. I also really like how she completely messes up towards the end like anger, disgust, and fear in the original. I do prefer the anxiety stuff over Joy trying to get back to headquarters, honestly. It's really realistic and it's a lot more interesting. And she is an actual villain. She does some messed up stuff here, like forcing Riley to do stuff she clearly doesn't want to do. Like, that is messed up. Yeah, in general, the new emotions, they're good. Let me know if you want me to do a ranking of them. I'd totally be open to do that. I like 8 out of 9 of them. Sorry, Barnum, you're kind of lame. I'm not going to talk about this one too much, but I just quickly wanted to talk about the visuals of this movie, and yeah, they were pretty cool. I think it's a bit generic and just standard Pixar animation, which is still really good on its own, by the way. But there's actually some Spider-Verse influenced animation in this movie. I mostly call this Spider-Verse animation because in this film, there are characters that have different animation styles from everyone else. Spider-Verse obviously does this better, but this one is very unique in how it tackles different animation styles. Like, there's this really cool video game character in this movie, which was super awesome. Him being like an older 2000s game character was super unique, and him moving in a, I don't know, video game character way, like moving for short bursts and stopping, was a really cool detail that I really liked. I love the part where he moves and gets stuck on a wall. I really wish the movie did more with these characters instead of the 5 minutes of screen time we got, but it was still pretty cool. I think one of the best elements of the original Inside Out was how visually creative it was for its time. Like, the scene where they changed dimensions was so visually creative for 2015, so I went into this one kind of expecting new visually creative locations, and while nothing was nowhere near as unique as the original, the new locations and ideas we got were pretty cool. I like the area with all the strings of thoughts. It's a cool environment, and it also makes sense why it wasn't in the first, because Riley hadn't figured out who she was at that point. Imagination Land comes back, which was nice. I love the idea of it constantly changing, and Anxiety using Imagination Land as a weapon is super realistic and makes perfect sense. The brainstorm part of the movie was also super cool and very creative. I just really love the world of Inside Out with all of its ideas and locations, and while what this movie introduces is not as cool as the original, it still feels like they fit into the Inside Out universe, which I really appreciate because a lot of Pixar sequels don't consider that. As I mentioned previously, one of my issues with the original Inside Out was that Riley didn't always feel human. Sometimes she just felt like a puppet being controlled by the emotions, but I think this movie does make a big effort to make her feel more like an actual person. There are several moments where the emotions can't control her to make decisions, and it's mostly shown through the tree of her personality. It's kind of like no matter what influence the emotions try to give Riley, her core is still in her head, and she has the option to do whatever she wants to do outside of the emotions' influence. There are some moments in this movie where memories pop up in Riley's head without any of the other emotions' influence, which was a small detail that I really liked. Still, despite making clear efforts and it being much better overall, I still don't fully feel Riley as a complete human. It's much better, but there are some moments that don't feel very realistic and are being controlled by the other emotions. Those moments could have been a metaphor for something, and maybe I shouldn't have been taking it at face value, but they felt very off. The Riley story also gets a lot more focus here, and I really like that. Almost the entire Riley plot is about hockey, which is a pretty cool direction to take the story. I just like how the story could totally happen to anyone. I also really like how a lot of Riley's decisions already make sense, but then the movie showcases why she's making those decisions through the emotions. The ending is actually a very stressful climax. Like, she's doing very bad things and it's super tense. Like, I feel that. Riley's story still has a lot of uncomfortable / cringe moments that remind me a lot of Turning Red. They even do the awooga thing, but I get the point of them existing and I definitely would not cut them out of the film. It's just absolutely not for me. Real quick, before we get into spoilers, I just wanted to mention some of the writing for this film. This mostly applies to the original too, but this movie doesn't feel very funny or unfunny. It's just basically passable 24/7. Like, I just find these movies charming. Barely anything is that funny, at least to me, which is fine since it could have been a lot worse. This movie also has some minor pacing issues. This movie has a crazy fast pace, which doesn't really bother me since it never really made the movie boring, but the original was so smoothly put together, and this one is a bit messy with its pacing. Like, maybe we could have gotten a little more of the emotions before Anxiety shows up, or at least a little more time with the emotions dealing with Anxiety and the new emotions before Anxiety kicks them out. Like, it was only maybe 10 minutes before they got kicked out of headquarters, so there could have been a little more time there. Okay, I want to talk about the emotional moments for a bit now, so spoilers for Inside Out 2. It's not like there are massive twists in this movie or anything, but I really think you should watch this movie without that knowledge, so skip to the outro section of the video now. The best part about the original Inside Out is easily its ending. It is seriously so impactful and so human that it does get me very emotional. Plus, Joy accepting sadness is also a really great scene that always gets me too. Inside Out is genuinely a very emotional, powerful film, so I was curious how this movie was going to handle the emotional moments. Just like the first, there are basically two emotional moments in this film. The first is where the tube to headquarters breaks and Joy, anger, disgust, and fear are stranded on the edge of Riley's mind. I really like the line Joy says about how that now that Riley's growing up, there's no room for joy or anger or fear or disgust. That's a great line and feels super realistic. Like, I'm sure a bunch of people just had anxiety in their teenage years. But besides that one line, Joy hitting her lowest point just feels a little bit cheap to me. Like, I don't feel this way about any other moment in the movie, but this just feels like a repeat of the first. Like, she's literally sitting on all the forgotten memories, just like the memory dump in the original. Despite the similarities, that scene doesn't have nearly as strong of an impact as the original scene. In the first, it was a super uplifting but sad moment about Joy realizing sadness's impact on Riley. But here she just kind of gives up, which just feels a lot more generic. Like in that movie, it was the climax of her arc, but here she's just admitting defeat, and then she gets over it pretty quickly, so it really just feels like a repeat of the original. The second emotional moment in this movie is the ending, which unlike the last scene was really great. I love how Riley evolves into her own person, not what anxiety or joy was trying to create. Instead, Riley chooses to create a mix of both negative and positive thoughts on herself, which was really beautiful. And then all of the emotions accepting this new Riley is so good, and a fantastic way to end this film. I love this ending, but unfortunately it really didn't have an emotional impact on me. It was more of a great scene than an actual emotional scene. I guess the first just had a much stronger, more powerful main theme than this one. I still thought it was great, but something about it just wasn't making me feel a ton. Besides that, I really love how this movie ends with us not knowing if Riley made the team or not, because it doesn't matter since her accepting herself was all that really mattered in the end. I really like that, and it's a great way to cap this film off. Yeah, overall, even though this review is a little negative, I thought this film was absolutely great. The visuals are great, the new emotions were all very good, except boredom, and even the emotions from the first movie were improved here. Riley felt more human and had an actual story, and the new ideas for this movie were all very creative. Plus, it had a really great ending to boot. While I do prefer the original a bit over this, just for being a little bit more consistent and having higher highs, this is a close second to matching the quality of the original, so I'm going to give Inside Out 2 a solid 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching, this is an epic outro.
It's a new
Dude,
cartoon.
I tell you what, I saw a commercial the other day about a new movie and I wanted to like die in real life.
Which one?
It was Inside Out and I was sitting there on the couch.
Oh
next to
my
Tanner,
god! Oh my god!
And then they were like,
"Oh my god!"
"There's new emotions. What is happening?" And like the kids like go through puberty, and then he's like, they're like,
anxiety.
"Hi, I'm anxiety." And it's like, dude,
I'm depression.
it's like, please actually
Bro,
kill
when
yourself.
when it said that she was like she
They
was
all
growing up or
screamed.
something like that, I did not know what it was when it said anxiety. I thought it was gonna be like fucking
anxiety.
period or something stupid. I thought it was gonna be like
Hi, I'm period.
Hi, I'm Boner.